You're going to think I'm crazy, maybe even a little self-righteous, but I promise you, what happened next was so bizarre and frankly, so completely wrong, that I still replay that day in my head, trying to make sense of it all. I quietly paid $150 for a poor woman at Walmart. I had no idea who she really was. The truth, the absolute, soul-crushing truth about her identity, didn't come out until 3 weeks later. And it didn't just shock me, it detonated my entire perception of what good deeds truly mean and whether they should ever be rewarded. My initial act of kindness felt so pure, so simple, but the fallout. It was an absolute mess that ripped a family apart. Tell me, if you had given a stranger a gift out of the goodness of your heart, only to find out they were a master manipulator, who was about to ruin your best friend's life, would you have ever admitted what you did? Would you have just let your good deed be the catalyst for someone else's destruction? Or would you have confessed and taken the blame for the chaos it unleashed? Because I had to choose, and the choice I made is still haunting me. So, let me take you back to where this whole nightmare began. It was a cold Tuesday afternoon, about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, and I was doing the most mundane thing imaginable, a massive grocery run at the Walmart supercenter on the outskirts of town. I was stocking up, the kind of trip where you need a cart and a half, not just for myself, but because my best friend, Sarah, and I were planning a Friendsgiving dinner. Sarah is, well, she was my anchor. We'd been inseparable since middle school. She knew my worst secrets, she was the godmother to my kids, and she was the kind of person who radiated genuine. At the time, she was blissfully, if a little naively, engaged to a man named Marks. Mark was fine. A little too quiet, maybe, a bit of a golden retriever personality, loyal, friendly, but lacking a certain spark. He had a great job in logistics, and they were planning a big spring wedding. Their life seemed perfectly, boringly happy. My life, by contrast, was hectic but stable. I work from home as a freelance editor, which gives me flexibility, but also means my Tuesdays are usually spent battling the soul-crushing fluorescent lights of Walmart. I was in the express checkout line, mentally calculating how much freezer space I had left, when I noticed the woman in the line next to mine. She looked utterly defeated. She was maybe in her early 40s, dressed in a faded, too thin winter coat, and pushing a cart that had more essential items than anything else: milk, eggs, 2 frozen pizzas, some cheap, off-brand diapers and a small birthday cake mix. Nothing extravagant, just the bare minimum to keep a family afloat. As the cashier scanned her last item, the woman pulled out a debit card, swiped it, and then her shoulders slumped as the screen flashed a Dick Linden as the cashier, a young girl with an exasperated sigh already forming on her face, immediately started listing the total at $150 plus. The woman, her voice trembling, apologized and started telling the cashier to take off the pizzas, then the cake mix, then the milk. You could see the shame and desperation in her eyes. She was fighting back tears, not wanting to admit to this public failure. She kept murmuring something about her husband's paycheck being delayed, but the cashier was already focused on tallying the diminishing pile of groceries. It just got to me. I'm not a millionaire, but I had a good week, and I thought, what is $150 to me compared to the crushing embarrassment this woman is feeling right now? It was a split-second decision. I didn't even think about it. I wheeled my half-empty cart to her cashier, handed the girl my credit card, and said in a low, quiet voice, "Please, just put her full total on my card. Don't take anything off." The cashier blinked, looked at me, then at the woman, and then she just shrugged and hit the total button on my purchase. The woman, whose name I later learned was Eleanor from the receipt, looked up at me, her face pale, and for a moment, I thought she was going to scream or faint. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, trying to form a word, but all that came out was a choking sound. I didn't want a scene. I truly didn't. I just wanted to do a good thing and get out of there. I smiled, gave her a small, tight nod, and said, "Don't worry about it. Just have a great rest of your day." I quickly turned my attention to my own card being swiped and my bags being loaded, trying to convey with my body language that the conversation was over. Eleanor, however, wasn't done. As the receipt printed, she grabbed my arm. A firm, desperate grip. And her eyes were swimming with tears. I don't know who you are," she whispered, her voice rough. "But I can't thank you enough. You just saved my daughter's birthday. I have 3 kids, and my husband. He's really sick. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." She rattled off a quick, almost frantic, plea to give me her phone number or address, but I gently pulled my arm away. "Seriously," I insisted, "it's nothing. Just pay it forward when you can. Focus on that birthday cake." And with that, I grabbed my bags, pushed my cart, and practically ran for the exit. feeling that awkward mix of intense warmth from doing something good and intense anxiety from being the center of attention. As I drove home, I actually felt a small, genuine surge of joy. I'd done a random act of kindness, helped a woman in a tough spot, and I'd never have to think about it again. The whole interaction lasted maybe 90 seconds. 90 seconds that would eventually blow up my entire life and Sarah's. The next few weeks were a blur of work, planning the Friendsgiving, and the usual holiday stress. Sarah and I were together a lot. We were going over seating charts, menu planning, and, inevitably, discussing her impending wedding to Mark. Sarah was excited, but there were these little, almost imperceptible flickers of anxiety in her conversation. I just wish Mark was a little more present, you know. She'd sigh, stirring her coffee. Has working so much overtime lately, and he's totally burned out. He barely wants to talk about the wedding details. I feel like I'm doing this all on my own. I, being the supportive best friend, would just reassure her, he's in logistics, babe, the holidays are his hell, it's just a phase. He's totally devoted to you, I had no reason to believe otherwise. Mark was always polite, always had a small, shy smile, and he treated Sarah like she was spun glass. Then came the Friendsgiving dinner. It was a huge success. The turkey was perfectly brined, the wine flowed, and everyone was laughing. Sarah and Mark were hosts, of course, and everything seemed great until the end of the night. After everyone else had left, Sarah, Mark, and I were sitting amongst the debris of plates and wine glasses. Sarah had gone to the kitchen for one last glass of water, and Mark, who'd been quiet all evening, just leaned forward and said, "Hey, thanks for this, man." Sarah really needed this night to relax. I waved it off. "No problem, you guys are family." He then hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, and he lowered his voice. "Look, I need to talk to you about something important. Something that's going to hurt Sarah. A lot, but you need to know. I've been seeing someone." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood rush from my face. "What are you talking about, Mark?" I hissed, looking towards the kitchen door. "You're getting married in 6 months. He ran a hand through his hair, looking panicked. I know, it just started as a moment of weakness at work. She's a co-worker. She's going through a really rough patch, her husband is sick, they have 3 kids, no money. I was just trying to help, and it escalated." He rushed the words out, trying to minimize the damage, but I was already seeing red. "Escalated? You're cheating on Sarah. You bought an engagement ring, you planned a life with her, and you're telling me you're having an affair with a co-worker, because she's going through a rough patch. Get out of my sight, Mark. You need to tell Sarah immediately." He pleaded with me not to say anything, that he was going to break it off, that he was confused, but I was completely disgusted. I told him if he didn't tell her by the end of the week, I would. That entire night, I couldn't sleep. I was sick to my stomach, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how I was going to have to deliver this devastating news to my best friend. I was angry at Mark, but there was also this terrible, sinking feeling that I was missing something, that the details of his story were too flimsy, too pathetic. A sick husband, 3 kids, no money, it sounded like a TV movie excuse. The whole thing was just gross. The next day, I was grabbing a coffee and sitting down to try and focus on work, but my brain was just mush. I decided to try and find some concrete evidence before I blew up Sarah's life. I went on LinkedIn and searched for Mark's company, trying to find any female co-workers with 3 kids. It felt creepy, but I needed to know if this other woman was even real. I found a few profiles, but nothing jumped out. I was about to give up when I remembered something completely random. I remembered Eleanor's name from the Walmart receipt I had thrown into my glove compartment. I don't know why, but a strange instinct made me think of the woman I'd helped. I pulled the crumpled receipt out, confirmed the name was Eleanor, and decided to search for her. Just in case, this is where the story pivots from a personal drama to a full-blown psychological thriller. I searched Eleanor, and the town name on Facebook. It took a few tries, but then I found her. Eleanor Gisev. Her profile was public, and there was a recent photo album, Mark's 40th surprise party. I clicked on the album, and my heart slammed into my ribs. The pictures were of Eleanor, clearly happy, clearly celebrating, and right next to her, beaming, was Mark. Not just next to him, but with his arm around her, kissing her cheek. I scrolled through more pictures, and then I found the caption that stopped my world. "Thank you to my incredible husband, Mark, for the best birthday. Love you, my handsome man and baby daddy." My head started spinning. I backed out and looked at her profile again. Eleanor Gies, the profile picture the exact woman from Walmart. The caption, husband, Mark. Mark has Sarah's fiancé. Mark. The man who was supposed to marry my best friend in 6 months. The sick husband with the delayed paycheck was Mark. The poor, desperate woman I had paid $150 for was Mark's wife. The woman Mark was cheating on Sarah with was his own legal wife. The sheer, staggering audacity of the deception hit me like a freight train. Mark wasn't having an affair with a co-worker. He was planning a bigamist marriages to Sarah, while still married to a woman he was actively supporting. And that's when the second, more terrible realization washed over me. Cars I had paid for her groceries. Sigh, out of my own kindness and blind desire to help someone I perceived as poor, had indirectly funded the household of the woman who was about to shatter my best friend's life. I had helped his wife feed his children with my money, while he was pretending to be an overworked fiancé to Sarah. I felt a cold, hard knot of dread and self-recrimination form in my stomach. I immediately called Sarah and told her to meet me at a coffee shop immediately. I didn't mince words when she got there. I laid out the whole terrible truth: the Walmart encounter, the receipt, the LinkedIn search, and the Facebook profile with the pictures of Mark and Eleanor. Sarah's reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of tears or anger, she went completely numb. She just stared at the table, her face a mask of disbelief, slowly crumbling into a look of absolute horror. "His name is Mark T," she said, her voice thin. "Her husband is Mark G." I pulled out my phone and showed her the pictures again. "Look closer, Sarah. Look at his face. It's him. He uses a middle initial at work, or maybe he legally changed it, but it's him. It's the same man." I showed her the picture of Eleanor, the woman I helped. Sarah started hyperventilating. Wait, you paid for her groceries. You helped her." And this is where the conversation became a terrible, twisted interrogation. Sarah was weeping now, not over the cheating, but over the complexity of the lie. "He told me he was divorced. He told me he was single for 5 years. He even introduced me to his sister, who must have been his actual sister-in-law." The story unfolded with agonizing detail. Mark was living a double life. He had a main home with Eleanor and his children, and a smaller, second apartment in the city which he claimed was his workplace crash pad. Sarah had met his family, his friends, all part of an elaborate, horrifying web of deception designed to make her believe he was single and dedicated. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have kept the detail about the Walmart encounter a secret, protecting yourself from inevitable fury for having helped the woman who was destroying her life? Or would you have confessed every single, embarrassing detail, including your innocent but deeply misguided act of charity, and risked becoming the secondary villain in her story? What is the right thing to do when your good intentions backfire and lead to a catastrophic outcome? I made my decision in that coffee shop. As Sarah wept, her entire future dissolving before her eyes, I couldn't hold back the last, most painful detail. I took a deep breath and told her, "Sarah, I need to tell you everything." The woman, Eleanor. I was the one who helped her at Walmart. The day he told you he was stuck in a meeting and couldn't call, I was paying for his wife's groceries. I paid $150 for the milk and the birthday cake for his daughter. The shock on Sarah's face was instantaneous and terrible. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore, it was betrayal. She looked at me, her eyes narrowed, and she whispered, You helped him keep his lie going. You were so busy being a good Samaritan that you unknowingly contributed to my fiancé's double life." The guilt was immediate and absolute. I tried to explain that I had no idea who she was, that it was a completely random act of kindness, but the damage was done. My good deed, which had felt so pure and simple, was now a poisoned arrow aimed right at my relationship with my best friend. We decided we had to confront him together. We couldn't let him get away with it. Then we set a trap. Sarah called Mark and told him she'd accidentally left her engagement ring in his crash pad apartment. She told him she was sending me to pick it up, because she was too busy at work. We knew this would force him to go to his real home to get the ring, so we drove straight to the address on Eleanor's Facebook page. We didn't even knock. Sarah had an old key from a previous arrangement he'd told her was for emergencies. And we just walked in. The scene was shockingly domestic. Mark was there, sitting at a kitchen table, helping a little girl with a puzzle. Eleanor was there, folding laundry. It was the picture of a stable, happy family life, the life Sarah thought she was building. When Mark looked up and saw Sarah and me standing in his entryway, his face went from a soft, fatherly smile to absolute, stone-cold terror. The climax that followed was not dramatic or loud, it was cold and controlled. Sarah, her voice steady and quiet in a way that was more terrifying than any scream, simply walked over to the table, pointed to the little girl, and asked Mark, "Is this your daughter?" Mark just stared at the floor, unable to speak. "And this?" Sarah continued, turning to Eleanor. "Is this your husband, Mark?" Eleanor, confused and clearly not understanding the gravity of the situation, just nodded, looking between us. "Yes, he's my husband." "Who are you two?" That was my cue. I looked directly at Eleanor, the woman I had helped, and said, "I'm the person who paid for your groceries at Walmart 3 weeks ago." "Eleanor. The one you were worried about your husband's paycheck being delayed." The color drained from Eleanor's face as the memory clicked. Then, Sarah delivered the final, crushing blow. She looked at Mark and then back at Eleanor, who was now utterly frantic, and said, "I'm his fiancé. We're getting married in 6 months. He told me he was divorced. He told me his name was Mark T." The rest of the confrontation was a blur of Eleanor's hysterical accusations, Mark's pathetic, stammering excuses, and Sarah's chilling composure. Eleanor realized that Mark hadn't been working overtime to pay for his sick wife and kids. He had been building an entirely separate life to marry another woman for what we can only assume was money or status, as Sarah came from a comfortable background. Eleanor kept screaming about the 150. "You took her money. The woman he was going to marry paid for our food." The irony was so thick it was suffocating. I had unintentionally been a bridge between his two lives, a lifeline to the one he was abandoning. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Sarah broke off the engagement immediately. She filed a police report, though the local DA later said that pursuing bigamy charges was complicated and expensive, and she wasn't ready for a protracted court battle. Mark lost his job. The company, which was surprisingly moral, found out about the situation and terminated him for conduct unbecoming. His carefully constructed life imploded. He was left with Eleanor, a wife who now loathed him, and children who were confused and scared. Eleanor, in a twisted turn of fate, reached out to me, not to thank me, but to ask for legal advice and to tell me she was divorcing him and was genuinely destitute now. She said, "Your 150 was the last good thing that happened to me before my life turned into a nightmare." I didn't respond. I simply couldn't. As for Sarah and me, things were irrevocably changed. She was, thankfully, free of Mark, but she was deeply hurt. Our friendship hit a wall. She forgave me for the act of paying for the groceries, understanding that my intention was pure, but she could never quite shake the fact that I was the one who provided the key piece of evidence that started the whole disaster. She kept saying, "If you hadn't done that, I might not have even looked at the receipt. I might not have figured it out so soon." It was a terrible, irrational twist of blame that she couldn't control. We talk now, but the easy, uncomplicated bond we had is gone, replaced by a deep, shared trauma and the ghost of a good deed that went terribly wrong. I realized that, however well-intended, doesn't happen in a vacuum, and sometimes, the smallest gesture can have the largest, most destructive ripple effect. What I took away from all of this is a painful truth: my desire to be a good Samaritan, to quietly step in and fix someone's minor problem, actually enabled a massive deception. I learned that just because someone looks poor and desperate, doesn't make them good. And just because an action feels morally right doesn't mean it won't have terrible consequences. I lost a piece of my peace of mind, and almost lost my best friend, all over a simple act of 150. I've often wondered if I just let the cashier take the pizzas off the bill. I'll never know. I'll never know if simply walking away would have saved Sarah years of her life. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my confession. It's a messy story with no clear hero. Like this video if you were on my side and understand that my heart was in the right place, even if the result was a disaster. Subscribe for more stories like this, that prove that truth is often stranger, and much darker, than fiction. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Should I have kept my mouth shut about the Walmart detail? Should I feel guilty? I need to know. I'll see you all in the next story.